Hey Amigos family, we are back for another episode of Cafecito Coffee with Danny, and I'm here with a dear friend of mine, Father Patrick Russell. So I know our stories go way back together. Amigos family, Father Patrick and I went to high school together. So about a couple hundred years ago, we were in school, and our life's past kind of took us on journeys, and our journeys have been reconnected over the past several years through Amigos stuff and through your work at St. Dominic. So I would love for you to jump in, introduce yourself to the Amigos family, and tell us specifically about your first trip years and years ago. Father Patrick was a pioneer, took one of the first trips with the church that we went with, and then I hopped on board the following year. So yeah, introduce yourself to the Amigos family and tell us a little bit about your first trip.
Well, thanks for having me, Danny. Really excited to be in Nicaragua and to just have the opportunity to have this conversation. I'm really excited for it. My name is Patrick Russell. I'm very blessed to get to be here and get to serve, especially as a leader at this point. Because when I first came to Nicaragua in 2009, I was going into my senior year of high school, and really just like most kids who went into the senior year of high school, like thinking that I had my life all together and figured out. But the reality is that I had nothing figured out in my life. And so when I was coming down here, I came down here because someone invited me, right? And for me, it was one of my really good friends, Aaron Bish. So Aaron is the one who first invited me to come down here. When they invited me to come down, I was very much like, you want me to do what? They go, where? Where is Nicaragua, right? And I definitely thought, okay, I'm gonna go down here and I'm gonna like change these people's lives. It was just the way that I grew up in my life and in America. I think most people, right? It was, okay, in order to be successful in life, in order to have a happiness in life, you have to have the biggest house and the nicest car, the newest phone. Unless you don't have those things, like you're not gonna find happiness. And I knew, of course, that I was going to encounter people that did not have big homes or nice cars or new phones. And so I thought like, man, these people are gonna be so lucky to have me. Like I'm gonna come and I'm gonna bring them so much meaning and purpose and joy in life. And not at all realizing how shattered my own life was and how broken I was. And the beautiful thing for me is that when I came here, I was not anticipating like just finding healing and finding purpose, which is really what that trip did for me. So it was very different than things are now, right? We were at Casablanca. A lot of as far as I remember, I don't remember good memory, but as far as I remember, a lot of the work that we did now, you don't necessarily do now and things like that, but it was still a super impactful trip. And I remember, I think it was in El Tronco, we were there constructing the school, and there was this little girl who just really, Aaron and I would just play with her all the time. And Aaron and I would stand, I don't know, about 12 feet apart from each other and just pick up this girl and throw her to each other. Her life is in extreme danger. No one used that. She would just dingle and laugh. And I don't know, but that just like really sticks out to me in my head. And at the end of the week, we were ready to leave and say our goodbyes, and all the kids are coming up and giving us hugs. And Maria, who of course did not speak any English at all, she like pulled on my hand and she said, "There's something I want to tell you" in Spanish. And so I got down on my knees, so we're eye lowering. And I said, "What do you want to tell me, Maria?" And she looked at me with these big, brown, beautiful eyes. And their little voice in English, she said, "I love you."
Oh.
And that like completely melted my life, because just in the world that I grew up in, that phrase wasn't heard very often. And that really just brought me so much peace and clarity. And so when I came back to the States after that trip, I knew that my mission was to love in the way that I've been loved. I knew that what God wanted me to do is he wanted me to share that love with other people. And so I began to try, and I lived a very selfish life. I think like a lot of high schoolers probably, right? I lived a very selfish life, a life that was very focused on me and how do I get what I want, and how is it that I'm gonna find pleasure or happiness in life, and a life that is completely devoid of others. and caring for others and loving others in the right way. And so when I came back from that, I really knew that things had to change. I really knew that I really had to start living a life that was more rooted in love and trying to show that love and bring that love and be that love to other people. So that eventually led me to, after a lot of prayer and discernment, think like, man, what if guys call me to be a priest? And I was very against that idea at first, like gutturally. I was like, yeah, that means I can't have, in the Catholic Church, I can't have a wife, I can't have kids, and those are things I really desire. And guys, I still desire that. But I just felt convicted that was what I was supposed to do at the time. So I entered seminary, was in there for 9 years. I say that I was on the slow track.
And you were on the enjoy the experience track.
Right. And God just worked a lot of miracles in my life over those 9 years and really just allowed me to keep living from a place of love and trying to be a missionary and a messenger of love to those that I encountered. And like all the time people would ask me, especially when I was in, not so much now, but when I was in seminary, people would ask me like, Patrick, like, why are you doing this, right? Because there's a level that's countercultural. There's a level that not a lot of people are choosing that path. In the church, sometimes they talk about like this crisis of vocations. And so people are like, why are you doing this? And to me, like the answer was always super clear. Because when I was in high school, I had an opportunity to experience radical love that changed everything. And I want to be that radical love of Christ in other people's lives. A love that in reality I first experienced here, and a love which has propelled me to the life I live now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's extraordinary. I think too for me, and this is kind of a fun moment. Who knows how many people Aaron invited me from our church.
Right.
But Aaron also invited me.
Right.
And so the fact that yours and I's paths are really vocation, life, what we've dedicated ourselves to, was because of that invitation. You know, we were little kiddos in high school, and we both said, yes, I'll go to this place that I maybe haven't heard of before. And yes, I'll meet people that I maybe haven't met before. But it's extraordinary to think, you know, that radical love that you talked about. That's what's had me be a part of this team all these years too. Mm-hmm. It's that sense of, I was so lucky to experience that at a time, and I really did too.
Yeah.
And say, how can I keep giving that back to the world?
A lot of times in our ministry we talk about planting seeds and never seeing the fruit.
Yeah.
And often I think that like Aaron probably has no idea like the seed that he planted in my life, or maybe yours, and the way that seed has flourished out. And I need to get better about like reminding him of that, because if it wasn't for Aaron, I would not be in this beautiful place with you today.
No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
I would be raised back. So absolutely. So fast forward 15, 16 years. So that was your first trip. You know, obviously your formation, you got ordained, and then, you know, eventually ended up at St. Dominic High School, in St. Louis. So now you had the unique experience of, I came as a kid. They came as a high schooler. And now you get to fearlessly lead a bunch of high schools. I was thinking this morning, you brought almost 100, you know, close to 100 between the past 3 years, kids to join us here and really welcome them into life transformation. I would just love to know, between your first trips and the good old days in Casablanca and recently being, you know, a leader of these young people, can you share just some of your favorite memories, things that stick out that you're like, this and this and this was just a good, amazing experience? I'd love to hear from you about those.
So, yeah, maybe a little backstory too. So, for a while,
my boss, his name is Jim Welby, a great man. He oversees the school. So he and I were having a lot of conversations about trying to find opportunities for our kids to go on mission trips, just because I knew the impact that made in my life. And not that I ever want to create the exact same experience or come in with the expectation that like, all right, kid, your life's going to be changed, just like my life was changed. But to provide opportunities for that, right? And so we began to look at what are some options of things we can do. And I was delighted when we were able to make this come true. And so yeah, it's our third year. And hearing, I don't think I'd given that much thought that, yeah, we probably brought around 100 kids down here. And that's pretty humbling for me to think about what that's been like. And I loved it. As a leader coming down here, so much of my perspective, so much of my viewpoint on this, and I don't know if this makes sense or not. I don't come down here for me anymore. I think that the first year, to be really honest, like the first year we brought kids down, there was a little bit of like self-seeking in that. So like, I get to wreck to Nicaragua and I get to have a similar experience that I had 15 years ago that changed my life forever, right? And I was excited to like be back here in this new place and be able to see just how much has changed in the last 15 years. So some of that was self-seeking, but as the years have progressed, what is so beautiful is God certainly still does things in my heart every week that I'm here, but I get to see the students whom I love. Yeah. I get to see their lives be affected. And so when I think back to like these past couple of years and some of the experiences that we've had, I always think of my students and the students of our school, our students, I should say. So I always think of our students and just the ways that their lives have been changed in some big ways and in some small ways. Whether or not it is, and it's always the smallest things. It's never the big thing, right? It's the little girl who pulls on your hand and says, I love you, right? It's the kid at the Amigos Academy who is willing to go jump roping with kids their own age. It is being out in the community digging a ditch and watching my students play tag with kids that live in a village. It is being able to watch your team pour themselves out and into our students. Like those are the moments, again, little things. There's little moments that truly allow our students, I think, the students of St. Dominic, to have their lives transform. And to see that, how that kind of carries over time after time. I mean, this summer, there's a girl who is serving as a long-term volunteer who came on her first 2 mission trips. And she's like, all right, this is the real deal. I want to do this, right? And I bet that if we brought her into this right now and she'd go to the conversation, I wonder what she would be able to identify as like her moment. But I just think that so much of it is just almost like the ordinary, not the extraordinary, right? Like is the ordinary life of being down here and seeing the work that we do.
It's the ordinary that becomes the extraordinary. I think about it. Mine was in Chunko as well. You know, for anybody listening and thinking, where is Chunko? Just like 10 miles down the highway. We were working on water system there years ago, and yours was your friend Maria, you know, kind of tugging on your hand and saying, I love you. And mine was from this kid, and his name was Yearling. And we played together the whole week, and we just had such a good time, and you know, got to know each other. I do air quotes because I did speak in Spanish then, but there really is a true connection that happens even if there's a language barrier. But we were playing like in Nicaragua, they had this marble game. You basically just like flick these marbles that hit each other, and she never really understood it. I always somehow lost, which is fair. I'm not great at any game, but so I would always lose. But we had so much fun playing with these marbles. So at the end of the week, I'm about to leave and we're giving our hugs, and Yearling with his 2 hands cupped stretches his hands out, all the little marbles in his hands. And he gave them to me, and I just remember I was like, that's all you have. You're a little kid. And you gave me the game that you play with every day. And still to this day, I have a little glass cup and I have all those little marbles that are in there still to remind me that it's those ordinary moments that become extraordinary that leads us to, if you can give it all away, what am I choosing to not give all away, or what am I choosing to hold back as well?
Yeah. Yesterday we were leaving the community of Casablanca, which we've been working in the past couple of days, helping to bring in clean water. And we're on the bus and we're driving out, and there's a student of ours who is just sitting in her chair, just silently weeping, right? Not in a big showy way or anything like that. In fact, I don't think she right now when I look at her, the tears are just blowing down her face. And I just went up to her on the bus and I was, "How are you doing, girl?" And she just said, "Just amazing the difference that a little bit of love can make in your life." It's like those are the moments, right? Just to watch the impact that had, that those 2 days in this community can have on one student's life. And for her, it was this visible thing, this external thing that we're able to see and measure in a sense. I know there's so many things that we really can't measure, and so many things that we don't see, so many ways that our students' lives are deeply affected, that aren't always in the external ways, but I know that they're here, especially when we get back to the States and I hear our students share with their friends about this experience, which is why we've seen the growth that we've seen year over year over year, is because our kids can't help but let their hearts explode, right? They're like Psalms Murphy's, right? Their cups are brimming over. They're just overwhelmed with the love that they can't help but allow their cups to flow in other people's cups. And to witness that, especially back in the States, that's so beautiful for me. And I think that so much of the why for us is seen there in the difference that it makes back home. Because I see the transformation that our students go through by being here for a week, and that transformation is not contained here, but that it really brims over into every aspect of their life back home. And that for me is the thing that fills me the most, certainly spiritually, but also like just from like a purpose standpoint. And like, holy cow, if that's not enough to keep you going back, I don't know what it is.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it totally does. Talking about experience with the students, but I love, thank you for sharing that about the students specifically, just kind of sitting there, as kids would say these days, feeling all the feels, just really all the slang, unfortunately. Yeah. And being there, because what it means is that their hearts were prepared for this experience. And I know a lot of people who are listening either are coming off of a trip or about to come into one. And I would love to hear from you just, some of your wisdom of when you sit down with your students, you want to prepare them to get to a spot where their hearts are open, where they can have an experience like the one that she had, where she's like, I met somebody, I made a deep connection, and I feel something deep about that. So that doesn't just happen. That doesn't just snap your fingers, you go, you eat a VBJ, you dig a ditch, and then that happens. There's preparation. So share with us a little bit about when you're inviting students and when you're preparing them, what do you tell them so that they come in with open minds, open hearts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm a big believer in vulnerability, huge, and it's something that I really try to instill in our students. Vulnerability comes from this Latin word vulnus, which means wound. And so I like thinking of vulnerability as woundability, right? To be vulnerable is to be woundable. And so much for our life, we want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our hearts. We don't want to be wounded. But there's something beautiful when you're able to start peeling those layers back and say, here's my heart. It's okay if it's wounded, because sometimes love wounds us in the most beautiful and purifying ways. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so one of the things that I've found to be so true is that I think that here it can be hard to sometimes take those layers back because a lot of the external realities that come with being in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the things that I try and focus on in our prep is I will absolutely talk about the experiences they're going to have. Of course, the kids, I think the things that they're most interested in is the what. Right. What are we doing? What are we like? What is it? We're out to this community. What does it actually look like for us? What is it like to be in a community?
How many blisters am I going to get? And
That's it, exactly. So a big thing that I try to tell our kids in the prep is they're going to be really uncomfortable, because I think that if we don't hammer that message home with them, then they get down here and they're like, no one told me it's going to be so hot. It's going to be hot here. Yeah. No one told me that I'm going to wake up in a pool of my own sweat. No one told me that I'm going to eat salty peanut butter chips. And so I truly try to highlight some of the less glamorous sides of being in Nicaragua, and not in the sense of like, man, I wish to know how visual it is. Not at all. But I want the students to not focus on that.
Yeah.
And so what I find to be really helpful is if we can really try to tell them all of the uncomfortable pieces, that allows them very quickly, like they turn into expectation. I was talking to a student last night. We were just talking about the difference between expectation versus reality, lived experience. And one of the students said something like, yeah, I came in here thinking this was going to be like the most physically miserable I would have ever been in my life. And it's not that bad. I'm like, that's great, buddy, because it's really hot and they're sweating more than you've ever sweat. And I'm like forcing these kids to drink so much water. But I think that because they come in with an expectation of you're going to work your butt off, you're going to be hot, there's no hot water, like all the luxuries of life back in St. Louis, none of them are here. Yeah. And I think that just like coming in with that allows them to get over that so quickly, to allow them to say, here's my heart. Instead of being like, No, I'm keeping my heart here because I am so uncomfortable. Because I'm very distracted by this stuff around. Exactly. So I know it sounds like kind of a silly thing to focus on, but that is really one of the biggest things we focus on in our prep and how we communicate about the trip. And like we do institutionally, we'll have a panel. We'll invite some of the students that went on the mission trip this year to speak about their experiences. So the president of school and I will sit down and we'll just kind of pepper them with some questions. And it's all about just the students who've been sharing their experiences with the students who haven't been. And I hope to kind of raise interest and desirability to come down here. And that's something we talk about too, is like, tell us about the heat.
Yep.
Tell us about the lack of hot water. Because it's important for kids that are thinking about going to know that's a reality instead of be like, surprise, it's really hot here. And one of the things that I've been surprised by is when we talk about that in prep, that makes some students even more excited.
Oh, I love it.
But yeah, they're like, we offer a couple different mission trip opportunities, and when they hear about the uncomfortability, and we say all the time, you have to be comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. Yeah. And so when they hear, that's true for I think anti-mission trip, but when they hear about the lack of or the excess of uncomfortability here, for a lot of kids, you're like, that's what I want. I really want to be uncomfortable because if I can really enter into that uncomfortability well, I know that that's going to be the most transformative thing for me personally. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's honestly something that we focus on the most is like, yeah, it's going to be a hard week, but praise God.
Absolutely. No, and as we were saying before with this experience, when they know this is what I can expect, all that stuff just doesn't even come to mind or heart. It's like, I'm going to focus on, we talk about people over progress all the time in the best way. And progress could be front of mind, but even more front of mind could be, I'm kind of not used to this. If I'm not used to this, how am I going to do stuff? And then the people come last. It's like just flipping the thing on its head and saying, no, we're going to focus on people first, and we're going to get some good stuff done. And then all the other stuff you might be worried about that's different, we can just not even give that space a try.
And the honest, sometimes I feel like we're kind of, the way that we do the prep, we're a little sneaky with the people side of the coin.
Yeah.
Because there's so much focus on the progress side of the coin for us, like talking about the work we're doing. And then once we get down here, we're very intentional. Our leadership this year is very intentional about not addressing the progress at all. So they come down here with the and I think that's actually,
I think it's a good thing.
I think it's your own thing, right? But the kids come down here with this expectation of great progress, and they believe with the experience of great people, and those relationships really helps to form their own identity, which is beautiful.
We've sat around all week, and this is, given it's because of your leadership, we've talked about everything that's happened. We've never talked about how much did we dig, how many pipes did we lay. We haven't, nobody's even mentioned that. They've talked about Jose, and they talked about Emily, and they talked about Ever, and they talked about Donald, and they've talked about all of their friends that they've made. They talked about Floor, and it's like that's what's risen. That's what's risen to the top here.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear. There's so much hope. There's so much hope in all of what you're doing and in your work. It's in Dominic. There's so much hope in what we get to do at Amigos, and even more importantly, there's so much hope that comes when we partner and we come together. What going on right now? What do you see in the future? What do you envision that's just providing you with a deep sense of hope right now?
I love that. Because I think that hope is so important, right? Because hope is like excited in the future. It's not just like what's happening right now, but it's what's happening in the future. And I've really enjoyed the relationship that St. Dominic has been able to form with Amigos for Christ, and particularly like an alianza, right? Like our partnership, being able to come together and find opportunities to support one another. And so it's been a huge blessing for us at St. Dominic to receive you and your team to encounter our students. We have a student population around 1150, and we bring, like, right now we have 30 kids down here. And so these 30 kids, we experienced Nicaragua, like literally in the trenches. But when you and your team come to St. Louis, you get to encounter, or truly, our 1150 kids get to encounter you. Yeah. And they get to encounter this, and not only you, but Jaime and all of these wonderful people who are willing to give themselves. And maybe you're in an auditorium or a big gymnasium, but you're willing to be like, all right, here's who we are, and vulnerability. Like, I'm going to show you my heart. I don't tell you about all the things we're doing. And I've even seen how that interaction, because it's 1 on 1,200. Yeah. I have seen how that interaction affects our students as well. And they don't, for some of those kids, they don't have the means to come down here. They don't have the same opportunities as some of the other students. But even that little 15-minute thing, right? I can see the ways that is able to open their mind a little bit more, to widen their aperture, right? But that way they can just offer a little bit more perspective, offer a little bit more of a different viewpoint. And so I think the hope for me is kind of twofold. Yeah, these 30 kids are going to come back, and they're going to be those messengers of love back at St. Dominic. But when you come, you're going to be this huge beacon of light, right? This beautiful life and path. And that all our students get to see that and experience that. And so finding new ways to deepen that partnership, whether or not it's, us trying to facilitate some sort of service at our school for you and your team to do with our students, or finding ways, just as we're here, and holy cow, like, you guys provide radical hospitality. And so for us to be able to return that favor and provide that same radical hospitality to you all, like, those are the things that bring me great hope. This one has with some scripture, and just coming across that line, it is better to give than to receive. And here we give them ourselves. And I feel like you, Danny, and your wonderful team are giving so much to us. And so it is such a joy and an honor to get to give to you and to your team the same way that you walk it us. That makes sense. Absolutely. That's a lot of that hope.
And thank you. I think just like to paint a picture of where that inspiration comes from our team. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. And I don't say this just say, oh no, thanks, that's good enough. To share the inspiration of why our team in radical hospitality, I love the strength of that, and the idea of that comes from radical love. Mm-hmm. Is our vision as an organization is to light the path for life transformation in Nicaragua and beyond. Mm. And so, the image that we have and the image that our team is really guided by is, if you can imagine you're walking down this path, and like the good old days, we all have flashlights on our phones now, but if you can imagine this lantern, what we know is that somebody led us to a certain point. They were like Marcotte and say, hey, you grab the lantern, no, you lead the way for a little while. So anybody that comes and joins us here, it's a gift for us to be able to say, hey, we want to show you something about this world, this beautiful world that we get to live in. And so thank you for doing that for us as well in St. Louis. But that's really ultimately the inspiration of why our team, why we are the way we are, and what's guiding us to welcome people with open arms always.
I think that the world needs a lot of light right now, and it's such a joy to get to carry out that dream with you, Salva.
All right, so last question for you. Thinking about, the whole experience in Nicaragua, this has been a part of basically half of our lives at this point. What is it, that when you leave Nicaragua and you go home, what little pieces of Nicaragua do you bottle up and take with you in a way that you can kind of feel like, that's a Nicaragua, that's Nicaragua in me coming out. That's an Amigos thing. Or is there anything that comes to mind when I ask that question?
Yes. So much of my day is spent with people, right? Which is a huge blessing. We talk a lot about in our executive leadership at St. Dominic. You talk about, from the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., we don't get anything done. No, because it's constantly, hey, I'm going to interrupt everything you're doing because of this crisis in my life. And it's an honor. It is an honor to walk with not only our students, but our faculty, our staff, just to be able to be with them in that way. And I think that sometimes I can fall in the mentality of, oh my gosh, I have 60 unread emails, right? I have 3 voicemails that I need to return, and I'm leaving for a retreat tomorrow that I need to prep on. But to be able to the person that is coming to be like, I want to come into your office, that to me is the most important part of my day. And I think Nicaragua has helped me realize that. That's been one of the biggest lessons that I've taken, is that people will progress. Yeah. And I think that it's just so much of the Western world, right? It's progress. And sometimes people can see like obstacles to that. Sometimes people can be like, I have a choice. I can look at that kid who's from my office, they're like, listen, kid, I got all this stuff I need to get done.
and you're in the way of that. Or I could be like, this kid is the most important part of my day. The emails will be there. The voicemails will always be there. But that kid and the opportunity to pour in and love that kid, whether or not it's for 5 minutes or 45 minutes, whether or not it's the first time I'm meeting that kid or that it's the 100th time that kid's in my office, like that's the most important part of what I get to do. And again, right, I talked before about that's why I want to be a priest, to be that love. And I know that there's this piece of me that is like work, success. It's really like, no, this is the success. And as simple as that sounds, Nicaragua has really, and Amigos for Christ in particular, has really helped teach me that value. And I think about that planting that seed, right? And that's a seed that is lived, that you, Danny, that planted in me. And there are, I imagine, humbly, that there are students whose lives have been impacted because of that seed you planted in me. Because I think that they used to use crypto to be like, hey, can you connect in 15 minutes? And now it's like, shut the computer. You are the most important thing right now. And so I thank you for that. And I imagine that our students thank you for that too.
Well, thank you. As your shirt so lovingly says, juntos. That's what it's all about. You know, juntos has been a part of my life for a long time. And, you know, we say in Spanish, juntos somos más, together or more. That's what it's all about. So that seed that was planted was just a part of what had to happen for us to be able to walk together.
Yeah. Well, very blessed.
Say thank you for being here. Thank you for your friendship, for your brotherhood, for your great radical love that you give me and everybody else. I'm really grateful for it.
Thank you again.
Of course. So Amigos family, thank you for joining us. And you know, when I think about Father Patrick, it's amazing to think about those seeds that were planted for us. You know, maybe you're gearing up for your first mission trip ever. Maybe you're coming back for your 15th or 20th year. And I just want to thank you for being a part of this. So, you know, whether you're on a jog or on a walk, you're driving in your car, you're hanging out with friends and family, I hope that you've been encouraged and inspired by this. And we just want to say thank you and that we love you and thank you for fueling all of this. So, Father Patrick, thank you again.
Thank you again.